right, so let's talk about this test. So if you want to have your notes out looking at this stuff as we go along, that might help you kind of get some answers. Maybe put a star beside something that if I say it right now, because I'm going to be straight up honest with you. In front of me, I'm looking at the test. You guys could be looking at your notes or whatever, but I'm looking at the test. So odds are, if I mention it right here, you know you're probably going to see it tomorrow. Okay. Muscle cells had special parts that other cells didn't. Well, other cells have them, but muscle cells have modified versions of them. What will we, so what do you call the muscles plasma membrane? Anybody see that on your notes? What's the prefix that means muscle? You really have two. Myo, and another word that you see a lot dealing with muscles is sarco. That's the prefix you see a lot that deals with muscles. Okay, so specialized plasma membrane of muscles is sarcolemma. Lemma is your plasma membrane. Sarcolemma is a specialized muscle plasma membrane. The thing that moves, this was a question on the last test. The organelle that moves stuff around inside the cell. What do you call it? Yeah, the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. All these little lines here represent the endoplasmic reticulum. And so instead of endoplasmic reticulum in a muscle, you have the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay, the functional unit of contraction is the sarcomere. That's the unit of contraction. Make sure you look at those notes at that picture about the sarcomere and you understand how the sarcomere works. Okay. The sarcoplasmic reticulum is special because a normal endoplasmic reticulum is going to move around proteins, move around all kinds of extra things. In a muscle, you really only need the endoplasmic reticulum to do one thing: to hold calcium and release the calcium when needed. So it's all about releasing calcium. Okay? I already mentioned the sarcomere. I already mentioned the sarcoplasmic reticulum. You have thick filaments and thin filaments inside your muscle. The thick filaments are the ones with the head that are going to grab a hold of the thick filaments and move them. So the thick filaments are myosin. They have the rod in the head that moves things. And then the thin filaments look like rope. They're actin. Thick filaments, myosin. Thin filaments, actin. All right, what's the muscle cell do if you run out of ATP? Well, metabolism, so you make more ATP through metabolism. I buy that. But that takes a little while. Well, I should rephrase. Let's say that a person dies. How do you know somebody's dead? You run over to them. They're not breathing. They don't have a heartbeat, right? So if they're not breathing and they don't have a heartbeat, what's not getting to their muscle? Blood, which carries oxygen. And that oxygen is all about, from the day one conversation, making ATP. So we got a dead person. What is their muscle not going to be able to do? Actually, dead people's muscles can move. Go ahead and say what you. I think you're there. Yeah, it can't go back to normal. What do we call that when you find a dead person? They have rigor mortis. Mortis is dead. Rigor means contracted. So if you find a dead person, they're going to have really, really stiff muscles because all of their muscles can contract, but they cannot relax because ATP is necessary for the muscle to relax and go back to normal. Everybody cool? That's why a dead person is called a stiff, because their muscles cannot relax. Their muscles cannot go back to normal. Make sense? All right, that's a kind of trick question, so don't miss that one. All right, so do muscle cells, true or false? Muscle cells look just like this. False. Muscle cells are long and skinny, and the picture right now on your Canvas course, I could bring it up, but oh well. The picture right now at the top of your Canvas course for this week is actually a micrograph of a muscle cell. What color is it? Pink or red, yeah, because most of a muscle cell is not empty space. Like most of your cell, most of this cell is empty space. Okay, but most of a muscle cell is full of those thick and thin fibers. It's about 80%. That's a number straight out of your notes. 80% of a muscle cell are those muscle fibers. Most of a muscle cell are those muscle fibers. Okay? All right, so let's talk about your 3 different types of muscle. What type of muscle is this right here? I know, don't say bicep. I know that's what it is. What type of muscle? Skeletal. It's called skeletal muscle because it's attached to the bones. What is interesting about skeletal muscle is that when you look at it under a microscope, what do you see? Let's bring up a picture. Muscle cells comparison. Actually, let's just do this. Oh, Lord. All right, big, nice, beautiful picture of skeletal muscle there for you. What do you notice? Little grooves in it. And those grooves have a name. Okay, very good, very good. They're little grooves. Somebody thought when they looked under a microscope 100 years ago, they thought they looked like stripes. And so they called them striations. Okay, these little lines are called striations, stripes. Okay, and they're formed because the fibers actually crisscross. And where there are 2 fibers, like where my wrists and hands are, you get a darker color. And where there's 1 fiber, like out here on my elbows, you get a lighter color. What would you expect to see if this muscle contracted? Other way around. Yeah. If this muscle contracted, all these stripes, all these striations would squeeze in like an accordion. Make sense? Okay. What else do we notice about this picture? What are those black dots? Or blue dots if you're looking at certain stains. They're nuclei. How many you got up there? Don't count them. More than 1, right? Normal cell has how many? 1. Muscle cells can have many nuclei. Where are the nuclei? On the ends, but think about, instead of thinking about the muscle cell going up and down, think about the muscle cell going left and right. They're on the edges. Okay, and the word I use for meaning on the edges is the periphery. These nuclei are on the periphery, and there's many, many, many nuclei. So multiple nuclei, periphery, stripes. What type of muscle? Skeletal muscle. Everybody good?
What's that stuff in the
The white things?
Yes.
It's called, so if you take a histology class in college, one of the things they're going to do is talk about how you make slides, because a slide is taking a 3-dimensional thing in your body and making it a 2-dimensional image. And so what you actually will do is you'll take a tiny little piece of muscle tissue and put it in a piece of wax, like paraffin, and you slice off super thin layers. And when you do, you don't always have anything in between. So that white spot in between is pretty much nothing. Now, would it really look like that in the body? No, because you'd see 3 dimensions and it would fill in those holes. Okay, so this was a trick question on histology test in college. I'll never forget. The professor pointed to something like that and said, "What is that?" And the correct answer was an artifact of fixation. Artifact means something left behind. Fixation is making slides. So all that is something left behind when you make slides. Make sense? Sometimes you'll see like a little like hair or something that looks like a hair. That if you make a crappy slide, you'll see that another artifact of fixation. Okay, good question. All right, so let's look at some smooth muscles. So that was skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle, voluntary or involuntary? Voluntary. Muscle cells that you are going to, so let's copy this image. Let's see if this one works just as good. That one worked great. No, that's almost just as good. So most muscles in your body are either skeletal muscle, which can be voluntary, and muscles attached to your bones, the muscles you move, or what's this one? That's skeletal muscle, and you have smooth muscle. And I really dig the word smooth muscle because I'll be honest with you, looking at this picture compared to the last picture, it definitely looks a lot smoother. You know, you don't have all those jagged edges and stuff. You just kind of have a flowing picture. A lot of times I think it looks kind of like an impressionist painting. Like I like Monet. I got my Monets up back there in the back. It looks kind of like an impressionist, just kind of, you can't see it from where you're sitting because they're on the cabinet there. But there's an impressionist paintings, those brush strokes that just kind of flow. This is very, very smooth muscle. And each one of these, like if you had one cell, like here, is one cell. So it's not like the last picture where you had the cell filled up the whole screen. These cells are just kind of flopping on top of each other. Nice, smooth cells. And instead of long and skinny, they're oval shaped. You get that spindle oval shape where they're skinny on the ends and thick in the middle. Okay? What did you see on the last picture that you definitely do not see on this picture? The striations. No striations in smooth muscle. Okay? Now, I said on the last picture, when your muscle contracts, the whole cell gets shorter and it looks like an accordion and all those guys bunched together. On this image, if you saw this image contract, any guess on what you would see? Go ahead. No, you're still, muscles can only get smaller. It's how they get smaller. Skeletal muscles get smaller by getting shorter. Smooth muscles, the whole cell gets smaller. The reason that you don't have lines on this image is because the fibers are going in all directions. So if you drew fibers on this cell, they would go like this. They would go out in all directions. So when the cell gets smaller, instead of just getting shorter, the entire cell gets smaller. So if we saw this muscle contract, all of these muscles would get smaller and they would all approach the center of the board. Does that make sense? Smooth muscle. What about the nuclei? One or more than one? One, middle or edges? In the middle. One centrally located nuclei, just like we're used to. Make sense? Okay? So we have one centrally located nuclei. We have the muscles that are more floppy shaped, I guess you will. Voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary. You do not think about doing this. Where's the most common place of finding these guys in the body? Digestive system. This makes up your digestive system. So in our mouth, we got smooth muscle or skeletal muscle. If I was to dissect James' tongue, would I find smooth muscle or skeletal muscle? Skeletal. What can you do with your tongue? Is it voluntary or involuntary? Am I thinking about doing that, or is my tongue just like a cat's tail? It's voluntary. Okay, it's voluntary, so I'm thinking about it. So it's what type of muscle? Skeletal muscle. Now let's keep on going. We get back to our pharynx. Pharynx is our throat. Mostly still skeletal muscle, because what do? Now let's think about swallowing. We all know how to swallow. Okay, feel free to make yourself look silly and think about swallowing real quick. Is it possible to stop swallowing halfway through? Most of the time when you start swallowing, it just finishes, right? It's really hard to stop your swallowing halfway.
I've done before.
Okay, yeah, but a lot of times you're gonna cough and have some problems, right? Most of the time you start a swallow, you're gonna finish the swallow. Because guess what takes over at the back of your pharynx and in your esophagus? Smooth muscle. And smooth muscle is going to be in your esophagus, in your stomach, in your small intestine, in your large intestine. Your large intestine, also known as your colon, in your rectum. All of that is smooth muscle. Now, thank God we got a little bit more skeletal muscle, because if not, we'd be like a bird. What do I mean? We just got to the end of the digestive system. What am I talking about?
Control. Defecation.
Very good. Defecation, pooping. A bird, when a bird's ready to poop, guess what? It just comes out. Smooth muscle. Cloaca of a bird is just straight up smooth muscle. When the poop is made, the poop goes out. Why is that an evolutionary advantage for a bird?
Because they got to keep on flying.
Yeah. For birds, evolution, it's all about cutting weight. Okay? And if you've got extra poop you're carrying around, that makes it harder to fly. Get rid of it, smooth muscle. Okay? Now, for you don't want to just poop any old where, because you don't want to poop and eat or poop and mate in the same spot, right? You want to go and poop somewhere different. So you want to have some control over where you poop. So guess what your anal sphincter is made out of? Skeletal muscle. Now, anybody who's ever been in a tight knows that there's also some smooth muscle there too that takes over. And when your rectum is full, says, hey, buddy, it's time to go. And sometimes that skeletal muscle loses the battle, if you know what I mean. Everybody cool? All right. So we got smooth muscle, we got skeletal muscle. One more type. Cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle, I'm not going to show you a picture of it because I'm not going to ask you too much crazy stuff about it. But it kind of gets some aspects of both muscle. Do you think about your heartbeat? So it's what? Involuntary, like smooth muscle. Okay? Y'all with me? But there's a problem. You don't want a heartbeat that uses smooth muscle. Because skeletal muscle has something that smooth muscle does not. Think about this skeletal muscle right here. Give me a length in inches, Kaya. 6 inches. Kaya told me to move this pin 6 inches. I can take my skeletal muscle and say, there's about 6 inches. Make sense? I was able to do that. Now, if Kaya told me to move food from my stomach to my small intestine 6 inches, because smooth muscle is really crappy at being exact. Skeletal muscle can do it. Think about all of the exact little movements you can make with skeletal muscles. Smooth muscle just blobs around. Do you want your heart to just blob blood around? You want the blood that comes out of your heart to be the same every single time. And so you need the involuntary mechanism like smooth muscle, but you need the precision of skeletal muscle. So under a microscope, cardiac muscle looks like which one? Would you guess? You think that cardiac muscle would look more like skeletal muscle or look more like smooth muscle under a microscope? Because smooth muscle just blobs around. Cardiac muscle looks like skeletal muscle, but acts like smooth muscle. So it's involuntary like smooth muscle, but it's controlled like skeletal muscle. Striations or no striations? If it looks like skeletal muscle, guess what? It does have striations. Now, if somebody's really, really smart and they have a PhD in muscle pathology, they could probably show a microscope and tell me the difference between cardiac muscle and skeletal muscle. But I have a degree in biology with a concentration in cell biology, and I could not. Everybody cool? All right. So we talked about smooth muscle. We talked about the different types of muscle. Let's make sure we got all the questions that we need to get. I think so. Tomorrow we're going to talk about some pathologies that we'll have some multiple choice questions for. And then we had this picture right here that I put up online last Wednesday or Thursday or so. Let's get that picture so everybody is on the same page. And if you Google muscle cross section, you'll actually come up with this picture right here. What do you think I'm going to ask you about this picture? Go ahead. What do you see? Okay, I'll buy that. So if I asked you what type of muscle is this, what would you say? Very good, because you see it attached to a bone. Okay, and all of the fibers, if you notice right here in the middle, all of the fibers are going in the same direction. Okay, that's not what I'm going to ask you about this picture. I'm going to ask you to label 3 things on this picture. And I know if you look up here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 things labeled. There's only 3 that I care about. Okay, and it's the 3 layers around your muscle. Okay, so last week, if you watched the video, I said everybody in here has a very intimate relationship with muscle, even if you don't realize it or remember. Okay, because we all, I'm thinking maybe not all of us, but most of us probably like to eat what? Say it loud. Specifically, what type of food? What type of food would I relate to muscles? I can't hear you. What do you eat that gives you protein? Yeah, meat. When you eat meat from an animal, I mean, yeah, you've got other things mixed in. There's a little bit of fat mixed in. You might be eating some organ meat sometimes, but most of the time when you eat meat, you're straight up eating muscle. Okay, so when you get that raw piece of chicken meat or steak that's uncut, that outside layer usually has kind of like a white kind of covering to it that you kind of got to cut through. Okay, the connective tissue, we're going to talk about that in the next chapter. That outside connective tissue is called epimysium. Epimysium, E-P-I-mesium. Now, if you look deeper, you have epimysium on the outside, perimysium is going to cover a group of fibers. And then on the very inside, the endomysium covers a single fiber. So the 3 layers of muscle coverings. Epimysium on the outside, perimysium covering a group, and endomysium on that inside layer. And you'll be able to label these tomorrow on a picture. Everybody good?
We're taking the test tomorrow, Friday.
Test is tomorrow. No, Friday, my bad. God, keep me straight. The test is Friday. Sorry about that on the blog and everything, on the Zoom and everything. James, keep me straight. Test is Friday. Sorry. Okay, but tomorrow we're pathology and up. And I want to do some catch up with you guys as well. Okay. Anybody watched the video last week and can remember why your muscle has these compartments? All right, if you didn't watch the video, why do you need to organize your muscle in these little groups? You really have 3 groups. You have the whole muscle, parts of the muscle, and then little tiny parts of the muscle. Why? It's all about being safe when you pick up a baby. What do I mean? Go ahead. Yeah, okay, I'm not specifically talking about the baby. You can also say being safe when you're picking up like a piece of fragile china or something.
You don't want to drop it.
You don't want to drop it, but you also don't want to pick it up the same way that you max out in weightlifting. You with me? If you didn't have these groups and you just said muscle get used when you picked up the baby, you would just go and the baby will fly off. When you pick up the baby instead, you're able to be very, very careful and you only fire some of your muscle fibers. The reason you have this organization like this is so that you can be very delicate and only fire a few muscles or max out and fire them all. Does that make sense? And everywhere in between. You know, when you're arm wrestling, which muscle fibers are you firing? All of them. But when you're, you know, giving your friend a high five, you probably only fire a few of them because you want to knock your arm off. Make sense? All right, so we got that labeling. So the labeling on the test right there. All right, and then the last thing, everything else on the test is your essay. And the essay is pretty much what we talked about on Friday. All about telling me from the time I tell a muscle, the nervous system tells a muscle to move, until you go back to rest. Tell me what happens. Every step along the way. Okay? Check out the notes. Watch the video. Watch the YouTube videos about it. Make it your own. All right? Every year I offer extra credit for this test, and I'll offer it again this year. If y'all want to do it that day. You guys are here this week, so to make life a little bit easier for you, but if you want to do it at home, you're welcome to try it as well. And that is, if somebody's interested and thinks they can do it, I will say the entire essay orally. And if you can do it faster than me, I'll give you 10 points on the test. Because you know, y'all pick on people pick on me, gotta talk fast. So I'll try to.
So we talk faster.
If you can say the entire essay from memory faster than I can say it from memory, I'll give you 10 points on the test. Make sense? You want me to demonstrate it?
Sure.
This is not my official time. My official time will be Friday if anybody wants to do it, okay? But this is your essay. All right? The nerve signal reaches the neuromuscular junction. Neurotransmitters are going to depolarize the T tubules. That triggers the sarcoplasmic reticulum to release calcium. Calcium is going to bind to troponin, which moves tropomyosin off the actin binding site. With the actin binding site revealed, myosin head is going to attach. ADP leaves, the myosin head contracts. That slides the actin past the myosin, which shortens the sarcomere. That's the movement of your muscle. ATP comes and flies in. When ATP attaches to the myosin head lets go of the actin binding site. ATP is going to hydrolyze, which releases energy, which puts the myosin head back to its cocked position. If calcium is still present, that cycle repeats. If not, you're at rest. That was a slow version because I probably need to take my mask off. I'm going to do it the best. That's staying far apart. That's your essay. It's written, it's in your notes, in the form of notes. You have it from what I just said. I'll post this video online. You have the YouTube videos on Canvas that I posted that show what I just said visually. Make it matter to you and be ready to rock and roll with it. The biggest mistake people make on this essay is they give me all of those details, but they forget to tell me when your muscle actually moved. They'll say everything in the whole essay, except for they'll never actually move the muscle, which is the question. Make sense? All right, I'm gonna shut down Zoom because I don't think we got anybody here. But we'll put this video up online, and you got the rest of the day today to work on making that